One of the largest dams in the eastern United States just came within inches of a catastrophic failure, a complete structural collapse that would have unleashed a wall of water 30 feet high on nearly 2 million people sleeping in their beds. The details are horrifying. 3 straight days of unprecedented rainfall, 150,000 emergency evacuation alerts sent to phones in the dead of night, an aging structure groaning under the weight of 400 billion gallons of water. This wasn't a distant possibility. It was a terrifying minute-by-minute reality. Before we go any further, think about the oldest piece of infrastructure in your town that people worry about. A bridge, a tunnel, a dam. Let us know what it is in the comments below. It's a reality for more communities than you might think. An incredible number of you watch these investigations, but a huge portion of you aren't subscribed. If you believe this kind of reporting is vital, and that these stories need to be told, please take just 1 second to hit that subscribe button. It is a small click that makes an enormous difference and guarantees you won't miss the next investigation. Let's begin. But here is the detail that reveals the true story. The Glenfield Dam was not built by the government. It was constructed in 1948 by a private corporation, Apex Industrial, to power a series of factories that have been shuttered for nearly 30 years. And federal regulators have been warning Apex since 1992 that the dam's emergency spillway system was critically deficient and could fail during an extreme flood event. They have issued 7 separate violation notices over 3 decades. Apex has made none of the mandatory upgrades. Instead, the company has spent millions on lobbying and legal challenges, arguing that the cost of repair is prohibitive for a dam that no longer generates them income. And on Tuesday morning, as sirens blared across the valley and families scrambled for higher ground in the dark, an Apex Industrial spokesperson issued a pre-written statement claiming the dam was performing within expected operational parameters. This is how it happened. The disaster began not with a crack in the concrete, but with a river in the sky. An atmospheric river, a term most associated with the West Coast, formed over the Atlantic and aimed itself like a fire hose at the Appalachian Highlands. For 72 unrelenting hours, it siphoned tropical moisture and unleashed a deluge the region had never seen. By the end of the first day, every stream and creek was a roaring torrent. By the end of the second, the Viridian River, the lifeblood of the valley, had swelled over its banks, inundating farmland and swallowing low-lying roads. The ground was completely saturated. There was nowhere left for the water to go, except up. Then the third day came, Tuesday. The rain did not lessen, it intensified. At 2:17 in the morning, a sensor array at the Glenfield Dam registered a water level that triggered the first internal alarm. The reservoir was rising at a rate of 6 inches per hour. By 3:30 a.m., dam operators initiated the protocol to open the tainter gate, a massive curved steel barrier designed as the spillway of last resort for just this kind of biblical flood. The motors whined, the chains shuddered. And then, nothing. The gate, seized by decades of corrosion and neglect, refused to budge. A 30-ton steel shield designed to save the valley was now sealing its fate. By 4:15 a.m., the state's emergency management agency, alerted by frantic calls from the dam's control room, issued the first evacuation alert to 50,000 residents in the town of Lowell Creek, situated directly in the dam's shadow. The message was blunt: potential for imminent dam failure at Glenfield. Evacuate to higher ground immediately. By 5 a.m., the reservoir had begun to overtop the earthen embankment on the dam's western flank. Live cameras showed water cascading over the top, not through the spillways. It was tearing away at the compacted soil, sending plumes of mud into the churning river below. By 5:45, the evacuation zone was expanded to include the entire Viridian River Basin downstream, encompassing the suburbs of the major city of Port Sterling. The number of people told to run for their lives swelled to 2 million. The National Weather Service updated its bulletin with language reserved for the most dire situations. This is not a drill. Catastrophic dam failure is possible. This is a life-threatening situation. And here is what made it so much worse. The primary escape route, State Highway 7, runs parallel to the Viridian River. By the time the evacuation order was given, multiple sections of the highway were already underwater. The very roads people needed to flee were impassable. Families who woke to the terrifying alerts found themselves trapped, with rising water in their yards and the specter of a 400 billion gallon tidal wave looming just upstream. The people being told to run for their lives had nowhere to go. To understand the knife edge on which these 2 million people were living, you have to look at the dam's construction. Glenfield is what's known as a composite dam. One half is a concrete gravity structure, a solid, unyielding wall anchored by its own immense weight. It is that section that houses the primary spillways that were operating at full capacity. But the other half, stretching for nearly a mile, is an earthen embankment, a mountain of compacted dirt and rock. It was built to hold back a placid reservoir, not to withstand the direct erosive force of a waterfall. Its strength is in its mass, not its surface. The material holding back the deluge was not concrete, not steel. It was Earth. The designers of Glenfield knew this. That is why they installed the emergency tainter gate in the concrete section. It was the safety valve, the one failsafe that had to work when all else failed. The plan was simple. In a truly historic flood, you open the gate, and the excess water screams through a reinforced concrete channel, bypassing the vulnerable earthen wall entirely. For 30 years, federal reports had documented in meticulous detail how the gate's lifting mechanism, the chains, the gears, the motors, were corroding in the ceaseless humidity. A 2011 report from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, or FERC, was particularly damning. It stated, in a probable maximum flood scenario, failure of the tainter gate to operate is not a risk, but a near certainty. Apex Industrial was sent the report. They filed a legal appeal against the findings. They were fined $25,000. It was a rounding error in their annual budget. Cheaper to pay the fine than fix the gate. So when the unthinkable happened, the water had to find a new path. It crested the earthen wall, and with every gallon that poured over the top, it clawed away at the downstream face of the dam, steepening the slope, undermining its foundation. Engineers call this process head-cutting erosion. It's an aggressive, runaway feedback loop. The more it erodes, the more water can flow over, which accelerates the erosion even faster. On the control room monitors, engineers could only watch, helpless, as the structural integrity of their dam was eaten away in real time. The dam did not fail, but for 6 terrifying hours, it was actively, visibly failing. The spillway's failure didn't just cause flooding, it turned the dam itself into the single greatest threat, transforming it from a shield into a ticking time bomb. It's stories of corporate neglect just like this that often get lost behind the big headlines of natural disasters. If you have a story about a community that has had to fight for its own safety against indifference, we want to hear it. Share your experience in the comments. We read them all. Here is what was happening on the ground, in the darkness. Jacob Miller is 84 years old. He has lived his entire life in the same farmhouse in Lowell Creek, a house his grandfather built with his own hands. His grandfather was also part of the construction crew that built the Glenfield Dam in the 1940s. For the last 20 years, since his retirement from the local paper mill, Jacob has written a letter to the editor of the Port Sterling Chronicle every 6 months. The subject was always the same: the decay he saw at the dam, the rust stains on the concrete, the overgrown vegetation on the embankment, the silence where machinery should have been tested. Most of his letters were never published. On that Tuesday morning, Jacob was woken not by an alert on his phone, which he doesn't own, but by the frantic barking of his dog, Buster. He looked out his window and saw the headlights of his neighbor's pickup truck submerged in his lower pasture. The water was already at his door. He and his wife, Elena, had only minutes. They grabbed a box of old photographs, their medications, and Buster. By the time they reached the road on their small tractor, the water was waist-deep on the porch. He sent a message to his daughter from a rescue center later that day. It said, "The house is gone. Everything is gone. I tried to tell them, your great-grandfather would be ashamed." He was not alone. All across the valley, thousands of families faced the same impossible choices. The Lowell Creek Firehouse, designated as a primary evacuation point, was itself inundated by 3 a.m. The people who fled there for safety had to be evacuated a second time, loaded onto National Guard trucks, and driven to higher ground as the water lapped at the fire engine doors. An emergency shelter that had to be evacuated. That is the scale of the chaos. These situations highlight just how interconnected and vulnerable our communities are. If you know someone who lives near aging infrastructure, a family member or a friend, please consider sharing this video with them. It could be the prompt for a vital conversation, and hitting the like button for every single person like Jacob Miller, who raised their voice only to be ignored, helps this story reach more people. It truly makes a difference. Here is what is not making most headlines. This is not a new story in America. In 1928, one of the worst civil engineering disasters in modern history took place in California. The St. Francis Dam, a massive concrete arch-gravity dam built to supply water to a growing Los Angeles, catastrophically collapsed just 12 hours after its chief engineer, the celebrated and imperious William Mulholland, had personally inspected it and declared it safe. For weeks leading up to the disaster, dam keepers and local ranchers had reported new, muddy leaks. Cracks had appeared. Mulholland dismissed the concerns as inconsequential. At 3 minutes to midnight on March 12th, the dam simply disintegrated. A 140-foot-high wall of water scoured the San Francisco Canyon, traveling 54 miles to the Pacific Ocean in just over 5 hours. It erased entire towns. The death toll is still officially estimated at 431, but historians believe it was likely over 600. It remains the second greatest loss of life in California's history after the 1906 San Francisco earthquake. The investigation that followed found that the dam was built on unstable foundations, a fact that was either ignored or not properly understood by Mulholland and his team. Their ambition outstripped their caution. No one ever faced criminal charges. Mulholland, a man once hailed as a visionary, took public responsibility, but his career was shattered, and he lived out his life in seclusion. Now compare that to Glenfield. The St. Francis Dam was a public works project, its failure born of hubris and tragic geological miscalculation. The Glenfield Dam is a private asset, its near failure born of cold, calculated financial neglect. Apex Industrial can't claim ignorance. They have a 30-year paper trail of official warnings from federal experts. They knew the gate was corroded. They knew the risks. They did the math and decided that paying small fines and fighting regulators in court was cheaper than fulfilling their duty to maintain a structure that holds the lives of 2 million people in its hands. The horror of the St. Francis disaster was that the danger was unseen. The horror of Glenfield is that the danger was documented, filed in triplicate, and willfully ignored for profit. This brings us to a much larger and much more frightening picture. The Glenfield Dam is not an outlier. It is a symptom of a systemic crisis. According to the American Society of Civil Engineers' most recent infrastructure report card, the nation's 92,000 dams earn a collective grade of D. A D. Over 2,300 of those are classified as high hazard potential and are currently in poor or unsatisfactory condition. The average age of a dam in the United States is now 61 years old. Many, like Glenfield, were built during the post-war boom and are now living well beyond their original design life. I know, I'm asking again. But look, we are deep into the weeds of this crisis now, and if you've made it this far, you are exactly the kind of person this channel is made for. We have a ridiculously low subscribe rate for our viewership numbers. Please, just take a single second and click that button. It's painless, it's free, and it genuinely keeps these deep dives going. Your support directly fuels this work. The problem is a complex tapestry of economics and regulation. Many of these aging dams, particularly smaller ones, are owned by private entities, corporations, farmers, small utility districts. As they age, the cost of maintenance, repair, and especially upgrading them to meet modern safety and environmental standards can become astronomical. For a company like Apex Industrial, whose factories on the Viridian River have been silent for decades, the Glenfield Dam is no longer an asset. It is a pure liability on their balance sheet. Their legal strategy is not to deny the problem, but to delay the cost. They propose deeding the dam to the state, a move that would shift the billion-dollar repair bill from their shareholders to the taxpayers. While these legal battles play out in court for years, the dam continues to decay. This regulatory environment is a patchwork. At the federal level, FERC oversees non-federal hydroelectric dams, like Glenfield, but thousands of other dams fall under the jurisdiction of often underfunded and understaffed state agencies. A dam owner in one state might face rigorous oversight, while an owner just across the border faces a much more lax system. This creates perverse incentives, where companies can shop for locations with weaker regulations, and where states are hesitant to impose costly new rules for fear of driving away business. The result is a slow-motion game of Russian roulette being played with critical infrastructure all across the country. We saw a near miss in 2017 with California's Oroville Dam, the tallest in the country, when both its primary and emergency spillways were damaged, forcing the evacuation of nearly 200,000 people. We saw the catastrophic failure of the Edenville and Sanford dams in Michigan in 2020 after days of heavy rain, a disaster also blamed on a private owner who failed to make required safety upgrades. Glenfield is not the first warning shot. It's just the latest and loudest. The floodwaters in the Viridian Valley have now receded. The immediate crisis is over. What is left is a landscape of devastation. The town of Lowell Creek is a mud-caked ruin. Hundreds of homes and businesses have been declared uninhabitable. The preliminary damage estimate is already approaching $3 billion. FEMA has set up assistance centers. The National Guard is still assisting with the cleanup. At the dam itself, a temporary fix is in place. After the floodwaters peaked and the pressure on the tainter gate was reduced, Apex flew in a specialized crew that used controlled explosives to blast the rusted mechanism apart, forcing the gate partially open. On the earthen embankment, they have laid down massive tarps and concrete blocks to slow further erosion. It is a colossal band-aid on a mortal wound. Okay, last time, I promise. Probably. If you believe exposing these stories is critical, you know what to do. One click. Your subscription is a vote for more investigations just like this one. It's that important. The question now is not if the citizens of the Viridian Valley will recover. They will. Communities are resilient. The question is what happens during the next 100-year storm, which climate models now predict can happen every 10 to 20 years. And the time after that. Apex Industrial is already claiming in court filings that their explosive intervention to open the gate demonstrates their commitment to safety, while simultaneously arguing that a full, multi-billion-dollar replacement of the spillway system is a financial burden that would bankrupt the subsidiary that technically owns the dam. The state legislature is deadlocked, arguing over whether to accept ownership of the dam and the associated costs. And so, every day, as long as a 75-year-old structure with decades of documented critical failures stands guard over the Viridian River, the lives of 2 million people depend on rusted metal, temporary tarps, and the balance sheet of a corporation that has already shown the world what it values most. The dam did not collapse this time. The residents had hours, not minutes. But the fundamental flaw, the corporate disregard that set the stage for this disaster, has not been fixed. It has been exposed. The reservoir is full. The legal battles are just beginning, and the next storm is already gathering strength out over the ocean.